So, I mean, they've got their teeth into this, haven't they, Cheyanne? At the very least, it keeps the story going. It allows them to say to Republicans, whose side are you on in this, in favour of disclosure or not? And if they're not, they're saying they're going to be accused of being part of a cover-up. Do you think this might fly? It's hard to know, I guess, at this stage.
I think that this is the Democrats trying to do everything that they can to keep this story alive, which is exactly what President Trump does not want to have happen. I think in some ways, the Democrats are a little bit lucky here, right? They have just a handful of Republicans who are in agreement with them, particularly those more on the House side than on the Senate side, right? But this is an opportunity for them to try to tell supporters of Trump, he's doing exactly what you accuse the Democrats of doing, of what you accused our person, Joe Biden, of doing, which is not being transparent with you. And so I think it doesn't even quite matter if this works for them in terms of getting those files out. What matters almost more is how long and how often can they keep bringing up the Epstein files.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty familiar tactic in politics, Mikey and Kate, isn't it? Just keep the story going if you think it's painful to the other side.
Absolutely. And to be honest, for a man who does not want to keep this story going, Donald Trump seems to be doing a fairly good job of keeping it going all by himself.
Certainly is.
Answering all sorts of questions that he could just not answer.
Yeah, well, like this one, on his way back from Scotland to the United States, he was on Air Force One, and he seemed to, didn't need a lot of pressing, but he just threw out there the suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein had stolen Virginia Giuffre. Giuffre, of course, the victim of Epstein's abuse and treatment, and all of the awful treatment. Well, there's Donald Trump saying that she was stolen by Epstein from his own resort, Mar-a-Lago.
I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
Well, I mean, Mikey, talk about keeping the story going.
Yeah, and this is extraordinary, because just a day before that, he'd been speaking alongside Keir Starmer, and he'd sort of teased a little bit of this, saying that the real reason he and Jeffrey Epstein fell out was because Epstein kept poaching his staff. And then he went into a bit more detail after people prodded him. I mean, that immediately to me on the Monday, that suggested to me the person we're talking about. And when he went all the way and basically said, yes, she worked in my spa, he stole her from me, that's an extraordinary thing for a sitting president to say, and it pulls him, I think, further into the story because it sort of personalises it a little bit. You can see. I think it was previously known that Virginia Giuffre had worked at Mar-a-Lago when she was 16, when she was allegedly hired by Ghislaine Maxwell to go and work for Epstein. But this sort of puts it in a context that it wasn't in previously, that not only had this happened, but Trump was aware of it and he got mad about it. And that was about 2000, I think, and about 4 years later, apparently something happened again, and
he lost patience with him. And kicked him out. Cheyanne Daniels at Politico on the line there from the United States. How big is this story flying there in the USA?
Yes, what I think stands out particularly about this is we have recently heard that the president was made aware a few months ago that his name is mentioned in the files that the Department of Justice has. And in some ways, I think there's some consideration of, are you speaking about this now as a way to say this maybe is why my name is in those files? I was aware that this had happened, or, again, she had been part of my employment at Mar-a-Lago. And so it's definitely drawing a lot of attention. But again, as you pointed out, it's one of those things you didn't have to comment on it. You are helping to continue to keep the story alive at the same time that you're saying you want to distance yourself from this disgraced convicted felon. All of those things are still true, and yet we still hear the president trying to keep the story alive at the same time he's saying he doesn't want the story alive anymore.
Yeah. I mean, look, I spoke a short while ago to a former advisor to Bill Clinton, who, he had this to say on the subject of this.
person. She was not found by Jeffrey Epstein. She was found by Ghislaine Maxwell. She recruited her there at the spa. This is Maxwell is somebody Trump has said he wishes well and he could give her a pardon. Her attorney has asked for a pardon or clemency or commutation.
That's Sidney Blumenthal, then, former advisor to Bill Clinton. And bringing up the subject of Ghislaine Maxwell, who is now becoming deeply enmeshed in this story, though she's been locked up for 20 years. Now she's been visited by President Trump's personal former attorney, who's now the Deputy Attorney General. And now the wonder is, will she be appearing before a congressional committee to give her side of things, to the extent that is even credible when and if she does, Cheyanne? I mean, they want clemency. The Maxwell lawyers want clemency and immunity before they appear on the Hill. It'll be a fascinating spectacle if she does that, Cheyanne.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing is that continued sort of divide among the Republican Party, where we have heard some members, particularly one that comes to mind is Representative Massey, who has been helping to lead Democrats actually in the charge to release these Epstein files, say, you know what, if she has credible information, then they should do whatever they can to get that information. And on the other hand, you have Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is saying, that 20-year sentence that she did receive is not enough. She should have received life in prison. Both are saying it is up to the president, who, as you mentioned, said he is allowed to give her a pardon if he chooses to. But I think that would be met with quite a bit more backlash than the president might want to see at this moment. If you think that his supporters are a little bit riled up right now, I think issuing a pardon for Maxwell would almost be a death sentence for the Republicans come our midterm election next fall.
Now the president's back on your side, back on U.S. soil. How are you reading the president's position on Israel and the Palestinian territory, or Palestinian state, as it will be, according to the British government, perhaps in a few weeks' time? Where do you think he is? Where do you think his head is at right now?
I think that this week and this past week has really been one of the first times that we've seen Trump break from Netanyahu when he was speaking about the starvation that is happening in Gaza right now. For a really long time, we had heard the president sort of giving Netanyahu his support, right? He wasn't really coming out and saying anything too different than or anything too, I would say, controversial, all things considered. But this past week, we've really been hearing him talk about the starvation, the images that are coming out that are just heartbreaking and horrifying to see. And that's really the first time, Trump is saying there's no denying that this is happening. We can see it happening. But still, we're still seeing him not take that final plunge of recognizing Palestine as a state. And frankly, I don't see that happening by this president. I think that particularly here in America, a majority of our lawmakers are in this situation pro-Israel. There are a few quite progressive lawmakers that we have who are calling for Palestine to be recognized. We have others who are saying we need a two-state solution. But for the most part, they are falling in line with what we're hearing from Trump, which is, we need a ceasefire, but at the same time, we're not going to declare Palestine its own state.
Yeah.